Hey guys, how are you doing today? I was reading this very inspiring book today. It's called The Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying. And there was a passage, a quote that was super powerful. And it reads like, "We do not know where death awaits us, so let us wait for it everywhere. To practice death is to practice freedom. The one who has learned to die has unlearned to be a slave. The one who has learned to die has unlearned to be a slave." I find that just so inspiring and powerful. And interestingly enough, for me, it has always been a huge inspiration to remind myself of my mortality. And it has been so in many of the spiritual traditions. But interestingly, I find sometimes when I bring up this topic to people, that there's only a minority of people who actually also find it inspiring. The majority of people, they find it like a little bit weird um, to think about death to begin with, and they find it to be almost like a negative mindset to remind oneself of this fact. And today one person told me, she sent me a message like um, that to remind oneself of death and to even prepare for it, if there's something like this, it would be like, if you would always prepare for the worst things in life, and you would always think about, what can happen, and it's like exhausting, because obviously when you think always about what can go bad, in any situation, and you always prepare for the worst case, that's obviously very exhausting. But is this really the same thing, to remind oneself and maybe even to prepare for death, or to, in life, to prepare for the worst that could happen in a situation? I found that a very interesting comparison, and um, I would encourage you to really look at this very closely, because I think it has a huge impact um, on how we live life, the way we look at death. And I think what I find very, very helpful in this is, first of all, and this is also, why I think this comparison is not working well, is because death, fundamentally, we need to be very clear about this. This is like the most, maybe even like the only certain fact in life that we have. It's the most certain thing that we know for 100% sure, and there has been, people talking about this. There's a saying like, nothing is as certain as death, and it's the most certain fact in our life that we are going straight to the graveyard. And whether that's going to be 50, 60, 70, 80 years, in terms of the length of this, life and universe that's going on for 13.8 billion years, our 80 years, or maybe 100 if we're like really stretching it with yoga and everything, it's like, it's like a fart in the wind. It's just nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's like a blink. Boom, gone. So we don't know where we come from. We don't know what happens after. But mostly we live life as if we were here forever in this current situation, in this current form. So we are really living most of the time, if we do not acknowledge and remind ourselves constantly, if we're not aware of it constantly, we live in a complete illusion, you know? So that's the first thing about it. And the second thing is, when you compare it like this, that we have an assumption, a very deep assumption and conclusion, that death is something bad. And I think that's really dangerous, I mean, because I think that's the reason why we try to um, kind of ignore it, why we try to, you know, um, pretend it wasn't there, um, why we're most of the time, consciously not, we try not to be aware of it. But I found this quote really interesting because it says, one who has learned to die has unlearned to be a slave. Because I think the truth of the matter is that in life, for most of us, if we're aware of it or not, if we acknowledge it or not, it doesn't matter at all. There's a very deeply rooted fear in us, in most of us, about death. And this fear, I think, it drives us in many, many ways. And so many fears that we have in life, that we connect to so many different things, are really an extension of that fear of death. That's why this quote resonated so much in me, because you unlearn to be a slave. Imagine how you would go through the world if you had completely no fear of death, because you haven't made up your conclusion. And the conclusion, we haven't consciously made it. It's something that we have kind of taken up, because most of us, at least me, I think, we have been conditioned in a way that death is something bad. It's something that's not talked about. It's something that's not really celebrated. People are very upset when somebody dies. They're very sad. And there's a big fear. And if you look at how people die, mostly old people, unfortunately, they die with a lot of horror, with a lot of fear, not with, there's not much nice things about death. And the truth is, we don't know, we don't have a clue what's happening. The only thing we know is that life, in this current form, the way we live, it seems to end, or it seems to transition, that's for sure. Because this body seems to dissolve and go back to earth, where it came from to begin with. But we don't know where we came from, we don't know where we go. We only know that in this little short fart of the wind, of this short 80 years we know this form that we have here. Now, but what happens if let's say we meditate on death and we realize, hey, I don't know what's happening, I know only that this form is ending. Then what's really happening in this moment if you acknowledge that? And I would encourage you to try this out for yourself, because it's much more impactful if you try it out for yourself. What I find is, if I do this, is that I get a huge appreciation for life, for every moment. I feel super alive. I feel super grateful to be in this experience right now, and I value it so much. And I become very, very aware. You might have had an experience where you had, maybe you were really sick, maybe you had almost an accident, maybe someone around you died, in a situation where you were confronted with this fact for a short moment. And maybe after that you experienced something like where you felt like really alive, and you were much more aware of what's going on, and you felt much more alive. So what's better, to live fully aware and grateful and being fully conscious of this precious thing that we have here, or to live in ignorance and to live unconsciously? I mean, everyone has to decide for himself, but I would encourage you really to try it out and to really reflect on this regularly, often. And the yogis, they would really go to the graveyards, to the crematoriums, where they would burn the dead body, and they would constantly remind themselves about this fact. And I would encourage you to try this out. You can go to a graveyard, or you can just meditate on it and really ask yourself, what conclusions have you already made up, and what are the emotions that you associate with it? And if those conclusions are really, based on truth, if they are based on knowledge, or if they are just things that you have taken on, and what impact do those conclusions and those emotions maybe have in you. And also just see what happens within you when you are aware of this moment, of this fact that you are going to die, this form at least, the way we know it. And how does this make you feel about life? Are you becoming more intense, more joyful, more, more eager to realize your full potential? Or is it the other way, that you become depressed? Really look into this. I would encourage you, and I would be really curious to hear what it does to you. So I would be really happy if you watched this video until now, if you could leave a short comment below what impact it has on you. Not like thinking about it in the sense that you think, what would it do? No, actually go through this short meditative process for a few minutes, reflect on it, and tell me honestly what you experience. Just honestly. I don't know what it does. I'm curious. If you leave a comment, I would be more than happy to read it. And if you liked the video, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I see you next week. Bye guys. Happy to be alive on this beautiful planet spinning in the universe. Bye guys.